Hi everyone and welcome to French Stuff. Comme vous pouvez l'entendre, aujourd'hui je vais faire mon podcast en anglais. C'est la toute première fois que je vais me lancer en anglais, mais bon, je me suis dit pourquoi pas, et puis comme j'ai un guest qui est juste génial. Today we are going to talk about one of the most popular combat sports in the world, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I am pleased to welcome Thabet, an experienced professor, second degree black belt. Thabet is a Jiu Jitsu enthusiast who decided to put his career on hold to follow his passion. Hi Thabet, how are you?
Hi Ribelle, I'm good, how are you?
Good! I'm so glad we finally got to do this podcast.
Likewise, it's
Yes.
been a long time coming.
Yeah, and thanks for the t-shirt, by the way.
You're welcome, it looks great.
Thank you. So, what first attracted you to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu? And how did you become so passionate about the sport?
Well, Jiu Jitsu for me has been a lifelong journey. Right? I started as a young teenager when I was 14 years old.
Yeah.
I was a very skinny, not very confident young man, and my parents were concerned that I would not be safe in a real life situation.
Okay.
And so I was pushed to try many different kinds of martial arts. You name it. Anything you can think of, I tried it. Taekwondo, karate, anything you can think of, right? And then nothing really stuck. We tried it for some time, and then it started to feel like it was forced. And so I withdrew and decided to try other things, team sports, football, basketball, etc.
But for how long every time, have you been trying the new
Maybe
the
a few
sport?
months.
Few months?
Few months,
Okay.
3, 4, 6 months, sometimes. It depends. I think the longest for me, besides Jiu-Jitsu, was Taekwondo.
Mm-hmm.
But then it could be for many different factors, but I withdrew. The environment wasn't right, maybe the teacher, maybe not. And then one day, my mother, actually I have to give her absolute credit for this, she pushed for me to try one last time. And I did this, I rolled my eyes, and she said, listen, if you don't like this one, I'll never force you to try anything again.
Okay.
So I said, okay, fine. And that was the time that I went to try Jiu Jitsu, and it stuck with me.
Okay.
I got so addicted.
But what did you find? What was this addiction?
I mean, I felt a very strong connection. I can't really explain it. It felt like something that is supernatural for me to learn and to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, in my opinion, even after so many years, it's such a natural thing for people to experience and to practice and to share, because it's not it is an individual sport.
Yeah.
In terms of one versus one.
Yeah.
But it's very much a team and a community sport.
We're gonna talk about this later.
Sure, absolutely.
So tell me, Thabet, Jiu-Jitsu has gained a lot of popularity in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think sets it apart from other martial art and combat sport? And why do you think it has become so popular?
Well, so there are two parts to this question. Why Jiu-Jitsu has been gaining popularity, and that stems back to more than 20 years, basically, of a trend that has been setting in, the trend of mixed martial arts, MMA. So maybe you've heard about this, maybe not, the rise of UFC.
Of course.
Right? So everybody knows UFC these days, but maybe 25 years ago, it was not a very common thing for people to...
No, it wasn't common at all.
Right, exactly. So what I think people don't realize, and some of them now started to realize, is that Jiu-Jitsu is one of the main factors that brought MMA to light. Back in the day when UFC was new, UFC 1, now you look at UFC and it's 200 something the events. When it was UFC 1, 2, 3, essentially it was one martial art versus another martial art, because they wanted to see who was better.
Okay.
And a 1 versus 1. And it really started with a Jiu-Jitsu guy, namely Master Royce Gracie, versus someone else who was very adept in his martial art, either a kickboxer or a professional wrestler or.
So it wasn't it wasn't the same disciplines.
Exactly.
Okay.
And for the first few years, basically Jiu-Jitsu annihilated, destroyed all the other forms of martial art in a way that became so obvious for the other fighters that to have a chance to win, they need to know some level of jiu-jitsu. And that comes back to the essence and one of the pillars that jiu-jitsu is very strong at, which is ground fighting. And the idea that almost any interaction or altercation is going to end up on the ground, right? Something like 80% or even more than 80% of any physical kind of contact is going to end up on the ground.
Why?
Because eventually someone has to either punch the other one, strike them to take them down, or get close enough to throw them or get the fight to the ground. Very few fights percentage-wise are finished when both opponents are standing. Okay. And on the ground is where jiu-jitsu has its strength, has its dominance. And so, like I said, again, for the first few years, that was MMA. It was jiu-jitsu versus someone trying to challenge the strength of this martial art. And once it was apparent that it was too much, then it became mixed martial arts. Then it became, okay, we need to know ground fighting, we need to know striking, and we need to know how to take someone down, right? And so that was a long time ago, more than 2 decades ago, almost 3 decades ago. So that's a big part of why jiu-jitsu is popular these days. The other part is, of course, the use of globalization, the power of media, people using YouTube, the internet, right? And because it's been gaining popularity over the years and spreading, jiu-jitsu came originally from Japan, and then to Brazil, and then from Brazil to the US. And once it got to the USA, it started spreading like wildfire. And from there, with the rise of interest, people want to try it in competitions, right? It kept getting more and more popular. Now, for us in the region, in the last, I want to say, 15 years or so, the rise of popularity in the region has been mainly due to the investment by the royal family, the UAE in Abu Dhabi. Sheikh Tahnoun bin Zayed, His Highness, started to learn jiu-jitsu while he was studying in the US. And when he came back to the UAE, he decided that this is something he wants for his people. So he put a lot of investment into it.
And nobody there didn't know that he was a sheikh, by the way, right?
When he was in the US,
yes.
Very few people, yeah. And of course his teachers knew and all that, but then the people who are now legends of jiu-jitsu were his teachers back in the day. So when these people come to visit and everybody's in awe about their presence, they go and visit him, right? And I'm sure they have their own special training sessions. But basically, that's what kicked off in the region the spread of jiu-jitsu. It didn't start in the UAE, I want to say, because there were some pieces all over the place. So around the same time that was happening was the time that I started to learn jiu-jitsu. This was back in 2003 in Jordan. So it was not spread at all. Nobody knew what the word was. It sounded like Chinese or Japanese, which it kind of is. And, over the past period, they made it a point to make it available, not only available for the people, but for the majority of the population to reap the benefits. So it was included in schools, in the military training, and now in the police. And, that's been helping.
Because it's a very good kind of self-defense, right?
It is the best, even if I say so myself. And it's a big statement, I know, but it's a proven fact. So that's another reason why it's popular.
I have the question. Yeah, I know. Let me just pass to the other question.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Sorry. I tend to get carried away when I talk about jiu-jitsu. So.
I'm sure. So Thabet, if someone is interested in trying jiu-jitsu but has never done any kind of physical fitness training before, what advice would you give them? And what can they expect in terms of physical and mental benefits?
Well, that's a very important question, because many people don't have maybe interest in sports, or maybe they don't have access to the right kind that will keep them engaged. And so if jiu-jitsu is the very first form of physical activity that they're trying, I would say it's very important to take things one step at a time. And because you see, your body and your mind have a lot of information to digest. The mind alone is enough for you to feel overwhelmed. It's like when you're starting to learn a new language, right?
Yeah.
You can't expect to become fluent very quickly. And at the same time, there's a learning process that you have to respect. And so for someone who hasn't experienced fitness or sports before,
Yes.
I would say the best way to go about it is to slow down the learning process, especially in the early period, to gain that bit of physical strength, let's say, not in the traditional sense, right? Because we work on the areas that you will need to use in Jiu-Jitsu, which are, for the most part, very natural, right? You're going to need to use your legs, your back, your core, right? Not so much traditionally the push or the pull. That will come, with time. But the Jiu-Jitsu movements themselves, or what we practice in classes and the drills, they really do build the core strengths that your body needs to practice them.
So they don't need any physical preparation, like to go to the gym or something like that?
Not at all, not at all. Actually, it's one of the points that I preach to my students and to anybody who speaks about it this way. Because I've heard it so many times. I need to get in shape before I start Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes.
I need to get stronger before I start Jiu-Jitsu.
But you know why? Because
Tell
the
me.
people are scared, like, to arrive, like, in any clubs, and they don't know what to do. They don't know the people. They don't know anything about the clubs, and they are scared because of le regard of it, okay? شو رح يقولوا العالم of it, what the people will say about them. That's why, they have, like, to get to good shape before or something like that.
Which I understand, right? But then it becomes the chicken or the egg. Do you want to get in shape before you start training, or do you want to train to get in shape?
Yeah.
And for Jiu-Jitsu in particular, you have to understand that it's a discipline. It's a very complex system of movements that your body has to learn, and then your mind has to be in sync with. And people have to understand that part is going to take time. But in the process, they will develop that strength that they need to proceed. Your body will get stronger doing the movements, and it will feed into the process, into this learning process.
But for the beginner, they don't gonna hurt themselves?
They will be. So this is up to the instructors, or the instructor, the team, the academy, the teaching process. It has to be versatile. It has to adapt to different circumstances, to different people. For example, if someone comes in who is out of shape, I'm not going to ask them to run for 20 minutes straight. It doesn't make sense. That's not what we want to achieve. Eventually, that will come to pass, but that's not the main goal. The goal is to have them build confidence for them in themselves and their own abilities, right? And for that, we take things one step at a time. I never ask people to do more than what they can. So I always say, do your best, and that's all I ever ask for. And we inch forward towards the progress to get you to the main point. Sorry.
So the warm-up in the Jiu-Jitsu is very important.
Well, yes,
like
of course.
Any sport,
like
I
any
think.
Sport, right?
So, and what kind of warm-up they have to do? It's cardio warm-up?
So there's two kinds of warm-up.
Yeah.
There's the traditional warm-up, which is they need to warm up their body to get the blood pumping into different parts. And this is really to avoid cramps, right? And, to get the heart rate going up into a healthy level before we start practicing the Jiu-Jitsu warm-up. So that's the second type of warm-up, where we practice the moves pertaining to the class of that day. So there are some movements that I need my students to practice always, and they're basics, right? It's like dribbling in basketball. They need to practice it always. But then there are some moves that are pertaining to the lesson of the day. So I need to prime the body. I need to get their bodies prepared for the movements that are going to happen later. So it makes the learning process easier if the movements already start beforehand. So I don't like to spend more than maximum 15 minutes of warm-up to gain the most benefit out of the class, and of course to keep the students engaged. And in reality, you don't need more than that.
So is it everywhere like that in the all clubs? Like they don't pass like more than 10 minutes for the warm-up? Or you decided how to proceed?
I can't speak for all the clubs. I have a very I have an interesting relationship with Jiu-Jitsu because I've been to many academies all over the world, in Jordan, in the US, and even in the UAE. And for me, I took when I was designing the curriculum for my academy, I took
The best of
some
each
of the
one.
pieces that I felt were most pertaining to benefit the learning process the most, from the different parts of the world that I attended. Now, they're not always the same, for sure. Some people like crazy warm-ups that they destroy people even before the learning part starts.
Yes.
Some people like that, right? But if you're looking for the majority, for the average person, which is most of the people that are going to come to you, right? They're not interested in doing cardio. If that was the case, they could go to the gym and go on a treadmill,
Of
or go to
course,
CrossFit, which is
yes.
now very common as well.
Yeah. They
So-
are here like to learn a discipline.
Exactly. So I don't like to spend a lot of time in that part,
Yeah.
because yes, it's important, but it can be built over time. That's one. And for me, it should be built using the movements that they are learning. So that's a 2-in-1. And lastly, I want them to stay engaged, right? I don't want them to lose interest just because, I don't want to go to class, the warm-up is too difficult, I don't want to go, I think I'm going to be tired today because of the warm-up. See, I don't want to have that reaction. I want to keep them engaged from the moment they step on the mats till the moment they leave. And I don't want anybody to regret coming to class that day. So the beginning is just as important as the middle, is just as important as the end.
At what age is it appropriate to start practicing Jiu-Jitsu Thabet? And what are the benefits for children and young people who start practicing it at a young age?
Okay, appropriate.
At what age first?
Okay, at what age? So we start training kids from 3 years old. But at 3 years old,
What are you doing exactly with
at
3 years
at
old?
3 years old, it's not the same jiu-jitsu that the 15-year-old or the 30-year-old is training, right? Children at 3, they have a completely different dynamic. Their brains are developing, their body is developing, right? And so you want to give them, or we want to give them, the way for them to develop physically and mentally and psychologically, right? And so what matters to us is that they're able to gain confidence in themselves, that they're able to practice their physicality, right? And gain movements that really are going to benefit them not only in jiu-jitsu, but in life in general. For kids from 3 to 6 years old, which is our level 1 in our academy, it's very important that I don't lose their interest. So I add a lot of games into the class, and I
Yes.
teach them by I teach them by playing, because
And to keep them motivated.
absolutely.
Let's say for someone who's never who's not a professional in jiu-jitsu,
Okay.
For how long he needs to train before to be able to compete? Compete? This is what you say?
Compete, yes. So it's very good.
Thank you.
I know this is supposed to be in French, so I applaud you for all your efforts. So for competitions, it depends, it varies. But let's talk about the majority and where it has the biggest volume and the time where people are really excited to experience it, which is the beginning stage, or we call it the white belt stage. Because in Jiu-Jitsu there are belts, and the first belt is the white belt. And in my opinion, it's the most important belt. So for people competing in that stage, I would say nothing less than 3 months, to prepare for something like this, to prepare to compete.
Do you think it's going to be enough?
3 months is
minimum. It's
3
the
months
minimum.
is what I say is a minimum.
Minimum, yeah.
Right? And let's say somebody is just started in jiu-jitsu, I would not recommend somebody to go into competition before that period of time, because it's like me sending you to war without weapons.
Okay.
Doesn't make a lot of sense. You're gonna go in and you're gonna feel the need to fight, but you can't punch, but you can't hold there. So there are all these rules, but you don't have the weapons necessary, right, to get you to the point where you can win. So let's say somebody's been practicing for a few years,
of course,
right? They have a lot of muscle memory, which is very important.
And they're more than there are at another level, not white belt, but like, absolutely, I don't know, purple.
There's blue, purple, brown, black.
Okay.
And so let's talk about, let's say, the middle section. So blue belts and purple belts. If somebody's been training for 2 or 3 years, then they can get ready to compete in 1 month or less.
Okay.
It can be, right? But then you go into other factors like the age of the athlete, the kind of tournament that they're competing in, right? And their physical state, right? If somebody has a pre-existing injury, right, we might need to work with them a little bit longer for them to gain confidence in themselves and not get hurt even more.
Of course.
Right? So 3 months is a good number for me, but it can be more and it can be less depending on the gravity of the competition and the experience of the athlete, right? So for example, me at black belt level, I don't like to go into competitions unless I'm prepared. I've done it before without preparation or without what I consider is appropriate preparation. And I've done it when I'm prepared, so I've seen the difference. And for me, a month is minimum.
Okay.
Bare minimum, like barely minimum, because you're going into the elite professional level of competition, and anything less than 100% prepared it's going to translate into a very bad result.
And in your discipline, in the Jiu-Jitsu, is it very important, like, to win or no?
It's important to learn.
Not to win.
Winning is nice. It's important. It's important that you know how to win, right? And it's important that for me, it's important that you get to experience it, or at least do your best to reach there. And winning can be in training, and it can be in competition. And competition is really a practical application of your training, right? And it's a way to test yourself. It's the next level of testing yourself after you succeed in one class, after you succeed in 1 year, after you succeed in winning against your training partners, after you succeed maybe against winning versus somebody from another gym who is visiting, for example, right? So that's very close to competition, but in an environment that they're familiar with.
Okay.
And so competition introduces that element of a new environment, of the stressful situation which you described previously, the audience, the lights, the stress of the time, and of a referee standing in the middle of the fight watching everything. So for me, that's working under pressure, applying what you learned in the best possible way. And that's, for me, the ultimate test. It doesn't mean that somebody who doesn't compete cannot learn or cannot improve in Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
It doesn't, right? But it's something I recommend for my students to do at least once in their Jiu-Jitsu, if we can call it career.
Okay.
In their Jiu-Jitsu journey, let's call it, right? I recommend it to happen at least once, just for them to experience what it means to take it to that level. And then after that, competition is not for everybody.
Of course.
Right? To continue doing it, it's not for everybody. But to experience it at least once is something I think very valuable. And I think all of my students who have done it, whether it's once or many times, will attest to this statement.
Let's talk about women now.
That's...
If someone, Thabet, specifically a woman, wanted to practice Jiu-Jitsu for the purpose of self-defense in real-life situations, how much time would they need to train to be able to defend themselves effectively? And this is a very important question.
It's a super important question. So I have a short answer and I have a very long answer, but I'm not going to give you the short answer.
No, but give me the middle answer.
We're not going to be here all day.
Okay.
So it's a sensitive and a very important subject, because at the end of the day, it's very important this time and age for a woman to be able to defend herself. We live in a world that sometimes is not safe, so this is a super important thing. Me, as someone who's married and has a family, I understand this a lot more than I used to before. But Um, again, my favorite period, not because it is, but because anything less than this doesn't make sense in the learning process. Not less than 90 days or 3 months. After that, you start to know your body, to know your surroundings, to know your bearings. You become more capable.
To get more confidence?
Exactly, to get more confidence.
But when you said like minimum 3 months, but how many times per week they have to train?
Let's say, as a good average,
Yes.
3 times a week.
It's a lot.
2 to 3 times a week. It's all right. I mean, for the purpose of learning something as valuable as defending yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I give you the numbers as an average, as an idea, right? Now, some people are going to be very quick learners. They're going to catch it on quickly. Maybe it'll take them 2 months. Maybe they need once a week, twice a week, right? It can happen, right? Someone who's already athletic, right? They already have control of their body. They can use it to do different things, whether it's sports or exercise. So, but let's say let's give you the pristine example. Somebody who's, for example, not athletic, right? And let's say physically not as strong. So this kind of person is going to need 2 to 3 times a week for 3 months to gain confidence in themselves, their abilities, and then to be able to implement the teachings of taking care of themselves in a real life situation.
But imagine that the guy like comes, and he's like super big, super huge, and has a lot of muscles, you know, and there is like a tiny woman who's practicing like jiu-jitsu for 9 months.
Right.
Do you think that she's going to be able to defend herself?
Well, let's talk about the definition, or at least the vision of what you have in your mind when you say defend herself.
Just to go run and to...
Absolutely. So there
to move it, to push him, to I don't know.
So there we agree, right? You're dealing with...
To kick him, I don't know.
You're dealing with an opponent or an adversary who's bigger, stronger. So we're not going to play that game of engaging and fighting this person.
Not.
We're going to play the game of disengaging safely and being able to, let's say, run away or to get to a safe distance where you can either call for help or, run away, essentially. But in order to do that in a safe way, it takes time for you to be able to control yourself mentally and to be able to bring out of you these reactions that are very time sensitive that you're going to need. And the number one objective is to keep yourself safe, is not to put your opponent to sleep or to fight them or to break their arm, because it's not that kind of a fight. In a street, anything can happen.
Of course.
Right, out in the world. So absolutely, someone who's smaller, weaker, at a disadvantage, the main thing to focus on is to get away from this situation. But that's going to take a bit of time. In Jiu-Jitsu, especially when we're talking about applying it to real-life situations, we practice muscle memory. We don't practice real memory. And muscle memory comes from repetition.
We don't practice the other one. What was it?
Real memory.
The real memory.
Real memory is when is your aunt's birthday.
Okay.
And muscle memory is like writing your name.
Okay.
So, for example, you can write your name now without looking, right?
Of course.
Without thinking about the movements, because you've been doing it for so long.
Okay.
And the magic number for us is 10,000. So if you do anything 10,000 times, roughly speaking, or some people say 10,000 hours, this 10,000 hours is the time that it takes for you to become an expert at something. This is like, roughly speaking, this is science. In the recent years, they developed this understanding. And then for repetition, the magic number is 10,000. Now, we're not going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 like this, right? But somewhere along the way of you practicing something, it starts to become second nature, right? And this is the kind of that we want to build. This is the kind of reaction, or at least the confidence that we want to build, that you're ready at any point in time to take care of yourself, no matter the circumstances, whether that be self-defense, which is the next level actually after competition, is putting it in a real life scenario, right? Or if it's in class, or if it's in a competition where there are rules.
If you take like a class of self-defense, not a jiu-jitsu class, okay, do you know what they will like teach them, learn them?
I know some things, right? Jiu-jitsu as a sport is different than jiu-jitsu for self-defense. So we need to also make that distinction, that it's this very big, complex thing that is a martial art, that once upon a time it was used in battle with weapons, etc. And nowadays we use the domesticated version, right? Let's call it, because we don't really we're not allowed to use strikes or scratches.
But I'm still speaking about women.
Correct.
Okay.
We are. And for the purposes of this, sports jiu-jitsu is different than self-defense jiu-jitsu. So yes, you can definitely learn jiu-jitsu for the purposes of self-defense, but it has to be in that frame, in that window of circumstances that is self-defense, because it takes into account things like the ability of your opponent to strike you or to hurt you with a weapon, right? And that's different than what we have in sport jiu-jitsu, because we don't take that into account. It's not possible for your opponent to use these means, because that's a controlled environment. And for self-defense, you're talking about an uncontrolled environment, so to speak. So yeah, to answer your question, it's possible and very advisable to apply jiu-jitsu techniques for the purposes of self-defense, but they have to be modified. It's not the same one that we teach for sport.
What are some of your most memorable experiences or achievements in the martial arts, and how have they influenced your personal and professional life?
Wow. I have many, but I can say with confidence that I have a few that stick in my mind for a very long time. Funny that we were speaking about the subject of jiu-jitsu becoming popular through mixed martial arts, because one of my biggest, most prominent memories is winning my first and to this day only mixed martial arts tournament. And that was, I engaged that when I was 19. I was a blue belt. I was living in Lebanon.
Okay.
I was in school. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of exposure for jiu-jitsu in Lebanon. I was very eager to learn and to practice and to compete. And I found a small group that's learning about jiu-jitsu. And once I started practicing more and more, I got the itch to compete again. So I told the guys, I said, do you have competitions? Because I want to compete. I had all this energy and all this enthusiasm to learn and to take it to the next level. And I needed to do it immediately. And they said, oh, we'll make a tournament for you. I said, okay, not for me.
For what?
They said, we'll make a tournament for you at the time.
For you, just for you?
I said, you don't have to do it for me, but if it's happening, I'll participate.
Of course, because it's for you.
Right. So sometime, maybe a week later or so, the gentleman who was teaching at the time in Lebanon, his name is Samer Yafawi, he came and he said, Thabet, we have a tournament. I said, okay, great. When is it? So he told me. And then as I started to think about how I'm going to prepare and all that, he said, but it's going to be MMA. I said, sorry? He said, yeah, there's going to be striking. So at the time, I had not done any striking preparation before. I had done taekwondo and karate for a few months when I was a kid. That doesn't count for anything. Yeah. So leave aside anything that's like not really technical that I may use. I'm not experienced in it. So I panicked. I said, what do you mean striking? How am I going to do these fights? I'm a jiu-jitsu athlete, right? And so I went back home and I called my coach. And at the time, I was learning from Professor Zaid Mirza of Jordan. I gave him a call and I said, 1, 2, 3, this has happened. how do I prepare? He's like, easy. He said, no problem. You do kickboxing classes and you do a lot of cardio and your jiu-jitsu is already fantastic. And then you go and you do your best.
You just add the kickboxing.
That's what he told me at the time. So for me, it was okay, it's an easy formula. Let's do it. So here I was already doing jiu-jitsu classes. I was already going to the gym to lift weights for physical conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I added 2 kickboxing classes and I started to do some kind of cardio that's, today it's very old school and maybe people have seen it in the Rocky movies. I started to run up and down the stairs. I was living in Lebanon and I was going to school in the American University of Beirut. And for those who know the campus, there's a very long staircase that goes from the upper campus to the lower campus.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that as a nice opportunity because my building didn't have the right kind of staircase, I guess, or whatever for me. So on Sundays, which is the day off, and well, now it's here, it's a day off, I guess. On Sundays, I used to go for a few weeks. I think I prepared for 1 month. Yes. I used to run up and down the stairs.
How many times?
I didn't count the times, but I'll tell you I'll tell you what I did.
Tell me.
I used to time myself.
Yes.
To see how fast I can go down and up. I said, okay, let's try how fast I can go. And so it started with, I think, 1 minute, and then by the end of my session, it came down to something like 23, 25 seconds, something like that, to go down and up the stairs. For me, that was wow, especially because when I was done, it was like, I think 2 hours or an hour and a half I spent on the stairs, and I was
tired, right?
Tired, very tired after all that. So I remember the staircase vividly because it was a very challenging part for me. Mm-hmm. And then I went into the tournament thinking that it's for me, tournaments are, you go in and you're part of a bracket, right? And you keep winning until you reach the final, and then if you win the final, you win.
Okay.
So I was there, and they had a strange rule set because they allowed striking, but only if we're standing. So if the fight goes to the ground, they said no more striking. So I said, okay, I guess I'll take the fight to the ground.
It's going to be easier for you.
It should be easy for me, right? But there's striking, so I cannot get hit in the process.
Okay.
So that day, I managed to cut it a bit short, I managed to win 4 matches, 4 MMA matches. They were what you call semi-pro because they didn't allow striking on the ground. So I managed to win 4 of these matches. 2 of them were by submission, which is when the opponent taps out or they give up. And the other 2 were by referee decision, which is the fight goes to the end and the referee decides who was the more dominant fighter. So that was a very big day for me because it was the first time, and like I said, till this day, the only time that I competed in mixed martial arts.
And what did you learn about like this win?
That nothing is impossible.
Nothing
Just because
is impossible.
You haven't done it before doesn't mean it's out of limits, and that we as humans we don't have limitations except what we impose on ourselves.
Thabet, looking to the future, Professor Thabet, looking to the future, what do you think the biggest challenges and opportunities are for Jiu Jitsu as a sport, and how do you see it evolving in the years to come?
Oh, big questions. Well, there's challenges everywhere, right? And because we're imperfect human beings, we're imperfect creatures, that means there's no limitation to how much we can evolve and how much we can grow. And Jiu-Jitsu is literally the art of using your body. It's a form of art. It's a form of expression of using our bodies to manifest our internal greatness. So challenges for me for Jiu-Jitsu, because it came so far. It came from being banned in a few hundred years ago in Imperial Japan to now being practiced literally all over the world. Like there's very few places that do not have a jiu-jitsu academy for you to practice in, which is an amazing thing for me. And it's world renowned, and it's respected, and it's revered, not diluted like, unfortunately, like many of the other old martial arts. And that's, in my opinion, because it's so effective. And if jiu-jitsu maintains its integrity in being effective in not only as a sport but in real life application, then it stands to grow a lot. And so for me, the challenge and opportunity for jiu-jitsu is gonna be to elevate to the next level, which is to go into the Olympics.
To the
Olympics.
To the
Olympic Games.
Really?
And that's something that's been in the works for many years, because, of course, being part of the Olympic Committee and the Olympic Games, you need to adhere to many rules, right? Which, for the most part now, I mean, are better than before, but they were not respected in the same way. So there's been a lot of work with countries and organizations over the world to get jiu-jitsu to that level.
Let me talk a bit about the belt. Okay. So you are a black belt with second degree.
Correct.
Okay. So the lowest one is the white one.
Correct.
Okay. And can you tell me
Let's call it the first one.
The first one. Yeah. Okay. What are the criteria like to pass from belt to belt? And then you have the stripe as well. Correct. So can you just quick explain it, please?
Absolutely. So,
thank you.
To go from belt to belt essentially means you're learning more, you're becoming more experienced in the martial art, right? And so we have 5 basic levels in jiu-jitsu for the adults: white, blue, purple, brown, black.
And for kids?
And for kids, we have
5 also?
We have white, gray, yellow, orange, green. So yes.
5 as well.
5 as well for kids.
So, but let's talk about adults.
So we're going through a learning process. We started on the white belt stage. We start to learn the different techniques of jiu-jitsu. The white belt is the stage where we learn a lot about the basics, what we call the fundamentals. So we start learning a lot about the things that are important for us to proceed. And the fundamentals are as important as having a base at the bottom of a very tall building, right? If the fundamentals are strong enough, you can build the tallest building in the world. And the same applies for jiu-jitsu. So we teach white belts the fundamentals until they're well equipped in it to progress to blue belt. And the blue belt is the master of the fundamentals. That's what I like to call it. Somebody who's very equipped at the fundamentals. Maybe master is a strong word, but they should be very good at applying the fundamentals. From blue to purple belt is taking all these techniques that you learned and seeing which of them work well together.
Okay.
For you to put in stages or in steps. So if we think about it in a much simpler way, in the white belt, you need to know how to apply each of the basic techniques separately. In the blue belt, we look at how they work well together, right? Whether it's attack or defense. And in purple belt is when the martial artist or the practitioner decides which of these systems, let's call them, of combining techniques, which of these systems work best for them. And they decide that I want to take this set of techniques, right? And I want to get very good at it. I want to become an expert at it. So they start to refine a certain part of their, like we call it their game or their strategy, a certain part of their jiu-jitsu. They start to refine it so that they become experienced in it and they can apply it to almost any adversary. After purple belt, which is really after purple belt, you go into the brown belt. And traditionally, the difference between purple and brown involved the attacks or as we call them, the submissions on the lower part of the body.
Okay.
So in the brown belt, you can attack the knees and the ankle part of the body in a more complex manner. In the past, it was not allowed for beginners because they would hurt themselves for lack of understanding of how the technique works. And of course, the brown is the last stage before the black. So essentially, you take everything that you learned and you make it a lot better, right? From brown to black belt is what I like to call going from A to A plus or A star.
But usually from brown to black belt,
Yes.
it takes like how long?
It could depend. It could depend on many factors, but generally speaking, it is going to take something like 2 years, 0 to 2 years, from brown to black belt. It
Is
could
that
be
the
more.
same between each belt? Or maybe from white to blue?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
It's gonna taking more time, or no?
So white to blue is typically if I can say it in this simplified way, it's the shortest and fastest learning curve.
Okay.
Because you go from knowing nothing to knowing a lot of things, right? So white to blue belt generally is going to take 0 to 2 years, depending on the frequency of the training and how well the person digests the techniques and how good they are at applying them. Some people I know earned their blue belt in less than a year, and some people I know got it in 2.5 years. So it's
really, it's depend the people,
right,
and the techniques and everything.
Right, but the main factor for me is going to be the frequency and the consistency of their training. As long as people...
Yeah, but imagine that someone comes like 3 times per week, okay, and like he doesn't get like the techniques, okay, and he's here like 3 times per week, okay, and he said, now it's the promotion day, and I'm still like in the blue belt, and I cannot pass to the purple belt, and I don't understand why. I'm doing like everything like perfectly.
Yeah.
It's frustrating as well, no?
Yeah, I'm sure. I can't tell you how many times
People,
I've seen this happen.
Yeah, and people like came to you and talked to you about this? It's unfair, why?
Some of them did, and some I can see in their faces. Over the years, I've come to know basically how my students and how people react.
You give the belt.
Correct.
So you have like a criteria, like...
Absolutely, we have a testing system.
Finally, Thabet, for anyone who's interested in learning more about Jiu Jitsu or training with you in Dubai, where can they find you and what they can expect from your classes and coaching?
Well, you can always find me at Entropy Jiu Jitsu in Dubai. I'm always there. I teach as much as I can.
Where is Entropy in Dubai?
It's in Al Quoz in Dubai.
Okay.
Quite a central location, and like I said, you can always find me there. Me or one of my team. Ask to learn Jiu Jitsu, and we'll take care of the rest. You can always expect from me and my team the absolute best, and I'll never ask for you anything more than the best you can give. And I promise that we'll have a very pleasant time together on the mats.
Okay.
On and off the mats.
Would you like to add something? Do you have anything that you want to share?
I think we've said a lot, and we've shared a lot about Jiu-Jitsu and about myself and about everything that people can expect as newcomers into Jiu-Jitsu. And I hope that it's a good thing you mentioned it. It's one of my biggest hopes that I can spread Jiu-Jitsu and impact as many lives as I can in the time that I have on this earth, whether it's through me or one of my coaches, or now it's through my academy, and then one day through the hopefully many academies that we have, because I do believe it's a very strong and powerful tool, and it can impact many lives. It impacted my life greatly. It changed my life. It changed many lives that I know of, and I know for sure that it can bring a lot of positivity into people's lives.
I really hope that you will open a lot of clubs.
Hope so too.
Thabet, thank you for participating to my podcast.
You're most welcome. It was a pleasure. Thank
Same.
you for having me.
Same for me. I really hope that you enjoyed the podcast with Professor Thabet. And please don't forget to subscribe, like, and put a comment on my YouTube channel. Thanks again for listening. I will see you for our next episode of French Stuff. Salut!